Welcome to the 8th episode of the Sydney Contrarian, titled Our Education System Does Not Attract Good Teachers, and Student Quality is Declining Even as the Measures Try to Hide This. This episode is the first of a series of episodes I'll cover on the Australian education system and its issues. Oh, and hopefully the sound quality has improved, as a friend kindly given me his microphone and mixer. Eric, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate it. And I hope my listeners would also appreciate you. Now, many issues exist with our education system, and they have major repercussions on our society, which I'll need time to build up my case. In short, I believe that if a country has an education system that is problematic in its foundations, it will lead to a weaker economy, declining social values, an increase in crime, poverty, and unnecessary government intervention. I believe that Australia, like many affluent nations in the West, gives more credit and recognition to its sports people, media personalities, and celebrities than those who are intellectually superior, be they experts in fields of knowledge, high achievers at school, or innovators. Switch on the TV, surf the net, or flip the pages of a newspaper, and you'll more likely find articles covering media, arts and entertainment personnel and their achievements. Weekend highlights would likely be a footy or cricket match, going to a concert of some internationally acclaimed artist, or watching the latest blockbuster movie, among many things. People would clamour to attend press conferences of these icons to get their autographs and photos, but you'd almost never hear about our leading scientists, inventors, or professors achieving that level of cult status in our country. What is more concerning is that as these in the sports and entertainment industry achieves increasing popularity and admiration, the education system is witnessing an accelerating decline. I'll go so far as to say that this issue gets very little passing attention, and many in the public may not know, let alone care. However, the repercussions of such ignorance and neglect for our education system will come back to haunt our society. An article back in March 2015 in The Conversation, titled 6 Ways Australian Education System is Failing Our Kids, the authors identified that the debate on our education system should not so much be about how much cash we're spending on education, but how the cash is spent. The 6 issues that the article highlighted are: number 1, Australian teens are falling behind as others race ahead. Number 2, declining participation in science and maths. Number 3, Australian education is monolingual. Number 4, international and migrant students are actually raising standards, not lowering them. Number 5, you can't have quality education without quality teachers. And number 6, early learning participation is amongst the lowest in the developed world. In this episode, we'll focus specifically on the first and fifth issues. I also link this to an issue I have personally identified on our current measure used to rank high school leavers in admitting them into universities, namely the Australian Tertiary Admission Ranking, or the ATAR. It's contributing to the problem by hiding the declining student quality. The article highlighted that the Australian high school students are falling behind while other nations' students are rising. More specifically, the article says, the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, survey tests the skills and knowledge of 15-year-old students in more than 70 economies worldwide, and it shows that Australian 15-year-olds score on reading, maths, and scientific literacy have recorded statistically significant decline since 2000. While other countries have shown improvement. Although there has been more media attention on falling international ranks, it is actually this decline in real scores that should hit the headlines. That's because it means that students in 2000 answered substantially more questions correctly than students in 2012. The decline is equivalent to more than half a year of schooling. Our students are falling behind. 3 years behind students from Shanghai in maths, and 1.5 years behind in reading. In maths and science, an average 15-year-old student in Australia has a problem-solving abilities equivalent to an average 12-year-old Korean pupil. The last two paragraphs are indeed quite disturbing. Australian high school students are particularly falling behind in mathematics compared to Chinese and Korean students, two countries that are in the top 10 of the world. The fact that 15-year-olds here are performing on par with 12-year-olds in Asian nations is more than disturbing. In my view, mathematics is a fundamental skill since it is core logic. Mathematics is critical for our day-to-day living, especially since our personal financial management depends on some level of mathematical proficiency. Having looked into our high school maths syllabus, and in my experience in the areas of finance, insurance, and risk management, I believe that one only needs to master up to Year 10 mathematics to be sufficiently equipped to manage their finances. However, from the results we see, it appears that Australian students are not being sufficiently equipped. Is it no wonder why many Australian workers rather pass off their cash to be managed by banks, financial advisors, and fund managers, those whose interests are not aligned to them, but actually are generating fees for themselves? And is it also no wonder that Australians are racking up much more debt because they are actually attracted by what's peddled in the media, which tells them interest rates are falling, and so therefore paying off the loan is easier, but they forget that they are actually accumulating much more, and even that is offsetting the reducing interest rates being offered by banks. Let us look at the fifth issue raised in this article as well, which I almost would consider to be the single most important problem faced by the Australian education system. If you want good students, you need good teachers. A good teacher not only is knowledgeable, competent, and will gain respect from the students, but they're also more likely to guide students to develop a right attitude to learning. However, the Australian education system is not designed to attract the best high school leavers to consider a career in being a teacher. So the article reads, while there are many factors that may contribute to teacher quality, the overall academic attainment of those entering teaching degrees is an obvious and measurable component, which has been the focus of rigorous standards in many countries. An international benchmarking study indicates that Australia's teacher education policies are currently falling well short of high-achieving countries where future teachers are recruited from the top 30% of the age cohort. In Australia between 1983 to 2003, the standard intake was from the top 26% to 39%. By 2012-2013, less than half of Year 12 students receiving offers for places in undergraduate teacher education courses had ATAR scores in the top 50% of the age cohort. Teacher education degrees also had the highest percentage of students entering with low ATAR scores, and the proportion of teacher education entrants with an ATAR of less than 50 nearly doubled over the past 3 years. We cannot expect above average education with below average teachers. In particular, I actually want to highlight where our future teachers are being selected out of our high school leavers. The fact that less than half of the Year 12 students who want to be teachers have ATAR scores in the top 50% of their cohort, and the proportion of those scoring ATAR less than 50 has doubled in the 3 years up to 2005 is not only alarming, but ridiculous. Firstly, we are taking the less academically proficient students to be our future teachers, which is disturbing to say the least. There exists so little incentives to be a teacher that only those who have little choice of what they can pick in their studies in university choose education. Secondly, the ATAR itself is a problematic measure as it is an inflated measure. An ATAR of 68 to 70 would typically be the median rank, not 50. And someone scoring below 50 ATAR is actually in the bottom quartile, as in the bottom 25% of those who sat the HSC. Hardly people that you actually want to be teaching the next generation. And to say that you are seeing a doubling of the proportion of people who are attaining that level becoming teachers, what type of hope do we have in our education system if this continues? So with this in mind, let us delve further into the ATAR and also its predecessor, the University Admissions Index or UAI. Understanding the mechanics behind the measure will help us better appreciate how serious the problem is with our education system in both its implementation and performance management. Again, I will focus on the New South Wales education system and its statistics in my analysis from this point on. The Board of Studies and the University Admissions Centre administer the New South Wales education system and the university admissions process respectively. The Board of Studies sets HSC examinations, grades them, and then gives the students their scores. The University Admissions Centre scales the scores of the students according to their relative difficulty when determining the ranking for the purpose of university admissions to different degree programs. UAC informs the students of their ATAR a day after the Board of Studies sends them their HSC results. The ATAR is then used to determine which university program they can enroll themselves into depending on the availability of places. Universities would have a set number of places, and those with a higher ATAR will be given a place first. UAC then publishes the minimum ATAR cutoff for each course in mid-January after offers are made, the minimum cutoff being the ATAR attained by the student who was the last to be admitted into the degree program. Aside from news reports in the recent 2 years of over-reporting ATAR cutoffs, inappropriate use of bonus points by universities, the ATAR itself as a measure is misleading. The UAC website says that ATAR is a rank and not a mark. It actually tells you how exactly it works. The site spells out that specifically the average ATAR is usually around 70, implying that most people are going to score this and also higher. With university cutoffs not changing much over the past 15 years, at least for the courses that I'm aware of, this means more people are being admitted into university, and an ATAR of say 80 or 90 is an arbitrary number and does not really reflect that much of academic proficiency. How come this average figure is so high, you may ask? The website spells it out clearly. The ATAR is a percentile ranking against students who started Year 7 with them. Thus, a person scoring an ATAR of 80 is ranked in the 80th percentile of those who started Year 7 with them. But is this not talking about those who completed their high school, not those who started high school with them? Therein lies a flaw in the measure. By measuring against those who started Year 7 with them, the students who leave in between Year 7 to Year 12, either because they finish a school certificate and decide to come out to work, or they finish a school certificate but dropped out before the HSC, these people automatically fill the bottom. The ATAR is not the first of the University Admissions Centre using measures whereby those who do not participate automatically will benefit and boost those who do participate. The UAI, last used in 2008, ranked HSC students against those who completed the school certificate. This measure would naturally give the HSC students under the UAI system less of a boost compared to that who are given an ATAR. But prior to 1998, HSC students were given the tertiary entrance ranking, which actually measured them against those who sat the HSC with them. Arguably, the TER would be a measure with greater integrity, since you are ranked against those who ran the race, not against those who have withdrawn or did not participate in that race but have done so in previous races leading up to it, to use a sporting analogy. Imagine ranking finalist runners in an Olympic 100-meter sprint by considering all the runners that have been eliminated in past races, so that even the last runner in this final race is not ranked last by virtue that they got this far? No, it'll be absurd. Sure, we'll recognize that these runners are all top-class runners, but let us consider their performances in that race and that race only. Otherwise, should there not be an argument that a gold medal be given to everyone other than the winner because they've gone this far? You can see the logic. I went into the scaling reports over the 2005 to 2016 period to get further information on how the UAI and ATAR ranks students and their distributions. The statistical tables are almost akin to economic reports in the sense that they present data, but sometimes I sense that they're trying to make it harder to compare over time as they change the format. For example, prior to 2009, when they used the UAI, they'll present a table on what percentile of the HSC candidature you would placed if you scored a particular UAI. Then, in the subsequent years when they had the ATAR system, they'll give you the percentiles and say this is the ATAR you would need in order to be in that percentile. Having gone through many government and official statistical reports in the past, I'm used to this technique in statistical reporting. When they want to hide something unfavorable, they'll change the mode of reporting so that when one wants to try and make comparisons, they can only do so by doing some extrapolations or approximations in adjusting the data. So that when you actually find a fault and you present the report, they can conveniently say, well, you're only making an assumption because all these extrapolations and approximations could be inaccurate. But you know the trick, like it's not that hard to find out. So I decided to give this a go. I tried to interpolate the percentile that a student would be placed under the UAI system for a given UAI, so it's comparable to that of the data presented in more recent times under the ATAR system. And indeed, I identified an interesting pattern, as you can see in the figure. Looking at the students in the middle, as in from the 30th to 75th percentile, because this is actually an area where seeing a lot of students being admitted into universities in recent times, and they probably are not going to perform too well in the courses from my experience. We can see that the UAI has gone up from 2004 to 2008. However, when the ATAR was first introduced in 2009, naturally there was a boost as the HSC students were ranked against more of the people who actually have left the system, namely those who left between year 7 to year 10. You can see that this did not last though, as the subsequent candidatures delivered lower ATAR for the given percentiles. This is a worrying trend, and it's also more worrying because the number of students have actually increased in terms of the ones who attempted the HSC. So assuming that the syllabus and assessment standards were not changed, and I believe that's also a stretch, the quality of students has actually fallen. As for 2004 to 2008 rising in the UAI for the percentiles, this may not possibly be a result of better quality students, as you might expect if I'm saying that the declining level that we're seeing in the ATAR system is due to poorer quality. And how can I be confident to make this claim? By simple deduction. If the quality of students has been increasing in the years leading to a change in the rankings, why would UAI even need to change to a more accommodative rank to include even more people that would not sit the HSC examinations and thus boost the marks? This would be counterintuitive. There is no need to window dress if the shot front is looking better over time. Would you need to Photoshop an already excellent photo, or are you satisfied with showing the beauty as it is? Well, obviously you've got the answer. To further flog this dead horse, which I think is pretty dead, but I really need to rub it in, I compared the mapping of the aggregate marks to UAI and ATAR over time, so as to see whether there might just be something that I misunderstood in the way the UAI and ATAR are determined. The aggregate mark is arguably the most reliable score since it takes into account the student's raw mark in the various examinations and then scaled according to the performance that they had in their school term. So in fact, even before they use a TER, actually, students would only be given the aggregate mark, which is a score out of 500, that is calculated from the 10 best units attempted. But again, I see that there is a declining trend even in the aggregate marks, so it actually proves my point. The decline is even more so the lower the UAI and ATAR. In fact, to put things into perspective, a student who scored less than 50% aggregate marks on the HSC would still have an ATAR of over 65. While we cannot say for sure that they're scoring a failing grade, since it depends on the courses that they have taken, we can be pretty sure to say that these are not teacher material students we've got when they're scoring such a level. What is evident from this analysis is that the inflation of the reported student performance index is substantial. Firstly, the aggregate mark is subject to a lower hurdle when being mapped to the ATAR, and this is over time. And secondly, the ATAR is already a more accommodative measure. Further, despite the handicaps being given to these students based on this, they're still delivering lower ranking as a candidate. Now, going back to initial findings in the article on the conversation, we can see how much more worrying it is that we have students who are enrolling to become teachers in the future who score rather low in their HSC. Furthermore, we see that the measure itself is hiding even more under the surface. Think back to episode 3 where I revealed the true story behind the unemployment rate and how it's measured. It seems like the same people may be responsible for measuring performance in the Australian education system. When you see a declining trend, and this may raise public awareness that something is wrong, it seems like they're changing the measure and in order to boost it by including those who normally don't count. The fact that media articles usually report the headline figures, so these percentages are reported without a question, they are either blissfully unaware of it, or they know but they need to peddle a narrative. This leads to society cruising along until they see cracks appear, and perhaps by then the machine suddenly splutters and cranks and stops. I'll go further to attribute that this prevalence of using this type of attitude to record and report and monitor the performance of various things that the government is supposed to be responsible for seems to suggest to me it is not an accident or a one-off mistake that they've just overlooked. When you have a government that is not so much wanting to fix a problem when it's identified, but to try to paper over it and then to mislead people in their reports, you need to start becoming more suspicious. So what can we do about this? I believe one has to take more initiative in educating their own children rather than rely simply on school teachers to do it. I do know, of course, to be fair, that some friends of mine who are very bright are entering into the education sector, so there is some hope. But do note that they are more exceptions rather than the rule. I also cannot stress the importance for yourselves to read a wide variety of useful books relating to economics, history, philosophy, science, and applied mathematics. Invest your time on furthering your knowledge and skills. Spend less time being enamored by pop, media, sports, and entertainment, as is the culture that we have nowadays. There is a time and place for everything. Well, that's it from the Sydney Contrarian. Stay tuned for a future episode. And once again, God bless.